She always loved to sing. As a child, she would hum melodies before she even knew the words. Music was her escape, her comfort, and her dream. Growing up in a small town, she had few opportunities. There weren't big stages or famous producers, just a local church choir and a few open mic nights. But that didn't stop her. Every day, she practiced. Every night, she dreamed. She admired the greats, Aretha Franklin, Whitney Houston, and Nina Simone. Their voices carried emotion, power, and soul. She wanted to be like them, to make people feel something with her music. But not everyone believed in her. Some people in her town thought dreams like hers were impossible. Others whispered that the industry was too tough, especially for a black woman from a small town with no connections. Still, she refused to let doubt control her. She held on to one belief: one chance could change everything. And one day, that chance finally came. She couldn't believe it. An organizer from a well-known venue reached out, offering her a spot in a talent showcase. It wasn't a huge event, but for her, it was everything. She had never performed in a place like this before. The stage was bigger, the lights brighter, and the audience larger than anything she had experienced. This was her chance to prove herself. She spent weeks preparing. Every day she practiced her song, perfecting each note. She imagined the moment when she would step onto the stage and hear the crowd cheer. She pictured people clapping, smiling, feeling moved by her voice. But as the night arrived, nerves crept in. The other performers seemed so confident. Some had been on stage many times before. She overheard them talking about their past shows, their experience, their followers. Doubt whispered in her mind. Was she really ready for this? As she stood backstage, waiting for her turn, her hands trembled. The announcer called her name. The audience clapped politely, but she could hear the skepticism in the room. Some people barely looked up. Taking a deep breath, she stepped onto the stage. The spotlight hit her face, and for a moment, everything else disappeared. She gripped the microphone. Then, she began to sing. At first, her voice was steady. She sang the first few lines with all the emotion in her heart. She had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times, but nothing could prepare her for what happened next. A few voices in the crowd started murmuring. Then, someone laughed. She tried to ignore it, focusing on the music. But then, a loud voice cut through the room. "Get off the stage!" A wave of nervous energy rushed through her. She kept singing, pushing past the lump in her throat. Then came the boos. It started with just a few people, but soon more joined in. The noise grew, drowning out her voice. She glanced at the audience. Some faces were blank, others looked uncomfortable, and a few people sneered. The humiliation burned through her chest. Her voice cracked. She tried to recover, but the moment was gone. The confidence she had built up shattered in an instant. The jeers continued. Someone whispered, "She's not good enough." Another laughed, shaking their head. Her hands trembled. She wanted to fight through it, to finish her song, but her throat tightened, her eyes stung. She couldn't do it. Her heart pounded as she turned away from the microphone. She hurried off the stage, blinking back tears. Backstage, she could still hear the noise from the crowd. The sound of rejection. She had dreamed of this moment for so long, and now it felt like a nightmare. She didn't wait to hear what the judges had to say. She didn't care. She just wanted to disappear. She didn't sleep that night. Lying in bed, she replayed the moment over and over. The boos, the laughter, the way her voice cracked. She felt like a fool. Had she really thought she could do this? That she belonged on a stage? She avoided her phone, afraid of what people might be saying. She didn't want to see comments or messages. She didn't want to hear people talk about how badly she had failed. For days, she stayed inside. Her voice, once so full of life, felt silent. Her family tried to comfort her. "One bad night doesn't define you," her mother said. "You've come too far to stop now." But she wasn't sure she believed that. Her closest friend sat with her one evening, watching the sunset. "You can quit if you want," they said. "But if this was really your dream, would you forgive yourself for walking away?" She didn't answer. That night she stood in front of the mirror, staring at her reflection. She had spent her whole life wanting this. Had one bad night really erased everything? She didn't know the answer. But deep inside, something whispered, "Try again." She made a decision. She wasn't going to let one bad night define her. If she quit now, she would always wonder what could have been. She had to try again. But this time, she would be better. She started from the beginning. Every morning, she warmed up her voice, focusing on breath control, tone, and projection. She watched videos of the greats, studying how they moved on stage, how they connected with their audience. She didn't just sing. She trained. She practiced in front of a mirror, working on her posture and expression. She learned how to command attention, how to own the stage instead of shrinking from it. But singing wasn't the only thing she needed to fix. She had to rebuild her confidence. So she started performing anywhere she could. Small venues, open mic nights, even street performances. At first, her hands still shook, and doubt still lingered. But with every performance, she grew stronger. Some nights people barely noticed her. Other nights, a stranger would stop and smile, moved by her voice. Those moments reminded her why she started in the first place. She faced rejection again, but this time, she didn't let it break her. Instead of running away from criticism, she learned from it. Instead of letting fear control her, she used it as fuel. Months passed, and she improved. Her voice became richer, her presence more powerful. She no longer dreamed of being ready. She was ready. And when she got another opportunity to perform on a real stage, she took it. This time, she wouldn't let the moment slip away. The opportunity came unexpectedly. A music event in a nearby city was looking for fresh talent. Singers, dancers, and performers from different places would be there. It wasn't a competition, just a chance to showcase talent. She hesitated before signing up. The memory of her last big performance still haunted her. What if it happened again? What if she froze on stage? But something inside her had changed. She had trained for months. She had faced rejection, struggled through self-doubt, and fought to improve. This time, she wasn't just hoping to be good enough, she knew she was. When the night arrived, she felt the familiar nerves creeping in. Her hands felt cold. Her heart pounded. Backstage, she heard the audience clapping for the performer before her. Then, the announcer called her name. She took a deep breath and stepped onto the stage. The lights were bright, just like last time. The crowd was large. But she wasn't the same person who had walked off that stage in shame months ago. She gripped the microphone, exhaled slowly, and began to sing. The first note left her lips, steady and strong. There was no hesitation, no fear. Her voice carried through the venue, filling the space with emotion. She didn't rush, didn't doubt. She sang like she had always belonged there. For the first time, she felt completely in control. The audience listened. No boos, no laughter, just silence, the kind that meant people were paying attention. She poured her heart into every word, and when the final note faded, there was a pause. Then, the sound of clapping. Then cheers. Louder than she had ever imagined. She had done it. The cheers grew louder, filling the venue with energy. She stood there, breathless, taking it all in. For the first time, she wasn't running off stage in shame. She was standing tall, owning the moment. As she looked out at the crowd, she saw something different in their faces. Respect. Admiration. Some people stood up, clapping with genuine excitement. A woman in the front row wiped away tears. A man near the back nodded, impressed. This was the moment she had dreamed of. Backstage, other performers congratulated her. Some told her how powerful her voice was. One person admitted they almost cried. She smiled, feeling something she hadn't felt in a long time, pride. But the biggest surprise came after the show. A well-dressed man approached her, introducing himself as a music producer. He had been in the audience, watching. "I don't know your story," he said, "but that was special." Her heart raced. "I'd love to talk about working together," he continued. "You've got something real." She could barely believe what she was hearing. The same girl who had once been booed off stage was now being offered an opportunity she had only dreamed of. She didn't know what the future held, but one thing was clear. This was only the beginning. That night changed everything. The producer followed up, inviting her to his studio. She had never been inside a real recording space before. The walls were lined with gold records, and the air smelled like creativity and ambition. She stepped up to the microphone, the same way she had on stage, but this time it was different. There were no crowds, no bright lights, just her voice, raw and real. She recorded her first song, pouring every ounce of emotion into it. When she listened to the playback, she barely recognized herself. She sounded confident, powerful, ready. The producer saw something in her. He believed in her talent, and for the first time, she started believing in it too. Her first song was released online. At first, nothing happened, no big reaction, no instant fame, but then something changed. A few people shared it, then a few more. Within weeks, the song started gaining traction. It appeared on playlists, radio stations, and social media. People connected with her voice, her story, her passion. Soon, bigger opportunities came. Interviews, live performances, more studio time. Her name started spreading. She wasn't just a singer anymore, she was an artist. The same people who once doubted her now played her music. The same kind of crowd that once booed her was now cheering for her. But she never forgot the journey. She remembered the pain of rejection, the nights when she almost gave up, the people who stood by her side when no one else did. And she knew that every struggle, every moment of doubt, had led her here. This was only the beginning, and this time, she wasn't afraid anymore.